Namaste, I Sahil welcome you to my YouTube channel Strategic Finance with Sahil. As the conflict between India and Pakistan heats up after a terror attack in India where Indian Hindus were targeted and killed by Islamic terrorists from Pakistan, it is important to discuss the economies of Pakistan versus India. As more than guns and ammunition, it is the industrial strength of a nation that carries it forward in a war. I will present an analysis that you will not find it in any news channel. In this video, first I'll compare the macro economies of both these countries. Second, I will compare the budgets of the countries. And lastly, the war waging industrial capacities of both these countries. So first, let us start with the macro picture of the economies. So starting at the top, what you see is the GDP of India and Pakistan, where India's GDP is $4.1 trillion. Pakistan GDP is 11 times smaller than India at $373 billion. India's GDP is fifth largest in the world and it would overtake Japan this year to become the fourth largest economy in the world. So India is in the top tier countries of the world when talking about the GDPs, and Pakistan is not even in the second tier of the countries. Now this tells about the immense potential of our services sector, our industrial manufacturing sector, and our agriculture sector. It gives us good snapshot of all of that at a macro level. Now moving on to a level below is looking at the currencies of both these countries. Now if you look at the currencies and the strength of the currencies, 1 USD is equal to 84 Indian rupees and 1 USD is equal to 281 Pakistani rupees. So you can imagine how weak Pakistani rupee is compared to the Indian rupee. And just to take a snapshot of the last 1 month, India's currency is strengthening and Pakistan's currency is weakening in the last 1 month also, since there was an attack. Now, how does it affect the common people? How does it affect the general government, right? Now, if your currency is weak, now what that means is you would need to spend more on imports, and the imports of goods and services is going to be much more expensive for the people of Pakistan, for the industry of Pakistan. So that's going to have a negative effect on an overall basis. They'll have much higher oil prices, they'll have much higher machines. If they import machines or everything is going to be much more expensive. The raw materials they import, everything is going to be more expensive, and that's going to have a negative impact on their economy as a whole. So this is another metric. Now another macroeconomic metric is the import and export. Now why that's important is that because it tells you about the interaction and the importance of a country with respect to the world, right? The higher and more import and export that you do, that means your goods are in demand with the world, and you are a big economy to take the imports also, right? So that's why import and export, the total trade with the world, is very important. And in this metric, what you'll see is that India exported $820 billion of goods and services last year, whereas Pakistan just exported $30 billion. So Pakistan's exports are 27 times less than that of India. They're nowhere in the world. So the importance of Pakistan is an irrelevant country. India is a relevant country. That's why manufacturing companies are moving. Recently, there was a news that Apple would manufacture all its iPhones for the US markets in India. They would shift their whole production line from US to India. So that shows the manufacturing capacity of India, that shows the importance of India in the global trade system. And looking at some of the items that India exports, some of the major items, one is machinery, electronics, chemicals, gems, oil and gas. These are some of the items, major items that India exports. Now in terms of some of the items that Pakistan exports, Pakistan is famous for exporting donkeys, football and clothing. So you can imagine how irrelevant they are in the global scheme of things. Now, lastly, in the macro level, what you need to see is the foreign exchange reserve. Now, why that's important is that India's foreign exchange of $688 billion, which is 46 times that of Pakistan. Now, in any conflict, right, the currencies are going to take a hit. There would be uncertainty in the market. This money of foreign exchange reserve, that's going to prevent an economy from going down. That's going to prevent the stock markets. That's going to prevent the currency from devaluing too much, because this money is a dry powder that the government can use and pump into the market, pump into the global trade system, to stabilize the currency. Now, let's say the Indian rupee after a conflict is going down. Now, with this $688 billion foreign exchange reserve that India has, what they can do, Indian government can do, is sell dollars and buy rupees. When you buy rupees, the value of rupee would go up, and what you'll see is that the rupee would stabilize and the fall would stabilize. Now, in contrast to Pakistan, they just have $15 billion of imports and the of foreign exchange reserve. They don't have the capacity to stabilize their currency. That's why in the recent news you may have heard that Pakistan has restricted the amount of money that you can take out from the banks, and not only that, they have restricted the amount of dollars that you can take out from the banks. So they are, even as of today, they are in a dire situation, economic situation. Now, these were some of the macroeconomic metrics that show that India can really sustain a conflict with Pakistan on a long term, and Pakistan itself is in self-imploding disastrous situation. Now, moving on to another level, that is the fiscal, looking at the fiscal budgets of both these countries and comparing those, right? Now, first, what you see in this is the budget received. Now, how does the government of India and Pakistan receive the money, to spend on different things, on a day-to-day basis? Now, Pakistan's government gets 73% of their money from domestic and external debt or loans. Only the 27% of the money that they get, let's say they get 100 Pakistani rupees, only 27 rupees is collected through taxes. The rest 73 is collected through all the different debts and loans that they take. So you can imagine how bankrupt, they can be officially termed as a bankrupt country, because they don't have money for even the basic of needs, because almost 2/3 of their budget is covered by taking loans. And India is having conversations with IMF, with World Bank, to stop these loans to giving to Pakistan as of today. So that's what India is doing. So this is very important thing to note. Now, comparing it with India gets 28% of their budget needs are covered by debt or loans. The rest is all covered by different taxes that the government takes. Now, many people say, oh, why should we pay taxes, and we shouldn't pay taxes. Now, if you don't pay taxes, you'll be in a situation where Pakistan is in today, where they're a bankrupt country, right? The finances don't lie. You can see the metric. These are official government numbers. I've studied the budgets of Pakistan and India. You can read those reports. They're out there in the public for both these countries, and you can read them on their own. So when you pay the taxes, you can be rest assured it's going in the right direction, and you can see it in the amount of missiles that India is firing to Pakistan, and the amount of air defense that India has thwarting Pakistan's missile. It is all because of the taxes that you're paying. That's what's keeping you safe. Otherwise, you would have the terrorist and Pakistani army marching all the way up to Delhi, if India was in a precarious situation like Pakistan. Now, moving on to the budget expenditures. Budget expenditures is how the money is spent. When you get the money, we last talked about in the graphs how both these governments were getting the money. Now we are talking about how the government spend their money. Now, looking at the expenditure, what we see is Pakistan spends 55% of their budget just to paying down the old debt. You can imagine how much of a debt spiral they are in, debt or loan spiral that they're in. They're taking on debt to pay off old debt. And not only that, 23% of the budget that they are getting is spent on the interest payment of that debt. What they're spending on all the other expenditure, be it defense, non-defense, they're only spending 22%, which is less than the interest payment. So you can imagine, if the government is spending 100 rupees of government of Pakistan is spending 100 rupees, 55 rupees they're spending on payment of old loans, 23 rupees they're spending on the interest payment on all the loans that they have taken, and only 22 rupees they're spending on all the development activities, all the defense or all the other activities that they're spending on. And the worst part is, out of the money that they're spending, majority of it goes to the defense services. It doesn't go into the development. That's why, now you have social media is available. They don't have any airports. Comparing it with India, they don't have airports, good airports. They don't have expressways. They don't have railways. India is in a class beyond their wildest imagination. India is many decades, or I would say maybe almost a half a century ahead of them in terms of the physical infrastructure, in terms of airports, highways, railways, metro systems that we have. We have the world's second largest metro system. We have one of the largest train networks, one of the largest aviation sectors. These are some of the metrics that India has, and it shows in the expenditure. Now, if you see I have the expenditures, India's expenditure in the percentages, but if you see, even in the percentages and even in the total money value, Pakistan's all non-defense expenditure is 21.88 billion. India spends more on subsidies than what Pakistan spends on the whole of their budgets, right? And India spend many times more on the highways, expressways, the transportation, the infrastructure that you see on rural development, on roads, on all the other things that you see on a day-to-day basis that you have, right? So there is a clear difference on the priorities of both these governments and how they spend the money. Now, moving on to another interesting aspects of comparing both these countries is the defense budget. India's defense budget is $77 billion, which is 6 times greater than that of Pakistan, whose defense budget is $13 billion. Now, this only tells the numbers, and when you go to the news channels, they may talk about this number and on a broad basis, but what it doesn't tell you the actual difference in the quality of equipment that India has. It's not only about the numbers, it's also about the quality of equipment. And I'll give you 2 examples on that. Now, if you look at the news channels, they'll say, okay, India has 1 tank, Pakistan has 1 tank, but that doesn't tell you about the quality of both these tanks, or the quality of, let's say, Pakistan has 1 missile, India has 1 missile, right? Now, just to give a common man's perspective on this, you have 1 Ambassador car and you have 1 Tata Curve, which is a state-of-the-art new car launched by the Tatas, right? Ambassador car doesn't have any electronics. It used to break down every few miles, and it was a hassle to drive. It was a hassle. It wasn't comfortable to sit in. Now take Tata Curve, a new generation car, right, which is launched few decades after Ambassador. The amount of electronic that goes into it, it doesn't need to get repaired very often. The engine lasts more. The comfort for the driver and for the passengers is much more. So that's the difference between the Indian equipment and the Pakistan's equipment, right? In the layman's term, the technology that we have is far superior. And the defense budget, this is what the defense budget goes into. And the latest example of this, you can see it with your own eyes, is that when Pakistan launched, in the last 2-3 days, launched so many missiles and drones, they couldn't hit anything because the air defense of India intercepted them and shot them down. Compared to what India launched, the missiles that India launched in Operation Sindhur, they were able to penetrate, the and destroy the terror infrastructure. And there are and this time India provided the images too. The India has such higher capacity of intelligence and the electronic capabilities. They are able to provide the videos of those explosions happening in Pakistan with the satellites, with drones and everything. So this really shows the difference between both the armies, right? Both in terms of the financials, what you see on your screens, and also in terms of the quality that I just explained. Now moving on to another very important thing, that is the industrial war fighting capacities of both these countries. Now let's say India launches 100 missiles, Pakistan launches 100 missiles, right? Pakistan cannot replenish those missiles. It's because they don't have the industrial capacity to produce those missiles. They need to call up Pakistan, they need to call up China, they need to call up Turkey, they need to buy it from them. And if you look at the macro situation where I explained, they don't have the foreign exchange reserves and the money to buy it in short notices and buy it right now. They're in such a precarious situation. They can only work with whatever Pakistan and whatever China and Turkey donates to them, the equipment that they donate, and that's not going to be the top of the line. They don't have the capacity to buy equipment. Now comparing that with India's capacity, India last year produced 1.27 lakh crore rupees of defense products, which is around $15 billion. This is greater than the defense budget of Pakistan. This is all the missiles, this is all the tanks, everything, guns, all the things that India produced last year. This is our industrial capacity. If India launches 100 missiles, we have the capacity to replenish it quickly with hundreds of more missiles. Another metric that I want to give you in terms of defense is that last year, India exported $3.5 billion of equipment, that is 23,600 crores of equipment to the rest of the world. This is the amount of equipment that we could produce and sell it to the world. Not only consume it for ourselves. This is the extra that we have. So this is the industrial capacity, the defense industrial capacity of India, right? So it is the Pakistanis who need to be worried. Every missile that they launch, right? They don't have the capacity to replenish it, but India can replenish it with 10 missiles of their own. And the great thing is, many of the missile equipment that we have is our own R&D and our own Atmanirbhar made in India missiles. Let's say Akash missile, or you have the Barak 8 missile. These are some of the missiles, air defense missiles that India has, or the ballistic missile, or BrahMos. You may have heard about BrahMos, which is a supersonic cruise missile that India has, that is used in attacks. India produces them in-house in factories in India. So this is about the defense capacities. Now moving on, some of the other industrial capacities examples that I want to give you is that let's take steel manufacturing for example. India is the second largest steel manufacturer of the world. India last year produced 150 million tons of steel, which is 1.5 times that of Japan. In terms of cement manufacturing, India is the second largest in the world with 450 million tons of cement that was produced last year, which is 4 times that of the US. You can see it in the amount of expressway that are being created, the amount of airports, the ports, the metros that is being created, all of those things. They not only have civil connotations to it, but also military connotations to it, because you can see it in the news channels is that those same expressway that can take your car at 120 kilometers per hour, that can be used to land fighter jets too. that can be used to transport tanks, that can be used to transport all our military equipment very quickly. Compared that to Pakistan, if they want to transport military equipment from one place to the other, they have broken roads. That's going to take 10 times the amount of time. We can just drive through at 120 kilometers per hour and transport our equipment and our soldiers from one place to the other wherever we want and at our will. Same, that also helps with the amount of railways that we have, right? All the trains that we have, that really can help us, not only in our economic endeavors, but also in a conflict. They can be used by the military to transport personnel and equipment across India. Now, moving on to another metric of manufacturing is the India last year produced 3.1 million cars and 23.9 million bikes last year, which is a huge number. India is one of the top manufacturer of automobiles. India's automobile sector is the fourth largest in the world, and soon it's going to be the third largest in the world. So we have a huge industrial capacity. Those factories, can churn out, your Tata Curves and your Mahindras, but they also can churn out, blast protected, mine protected vehicles for the Indian Army, Indian Armed Forces. They are also doing that too. They are manufacturing vehicles for the armed forces too. So it is the great industrial capacities that India has. Now, it's not only about the manufacturing. Now, moving on to the next metric that I want to give you is that in terms of the high-end, sophisticated industrial capacity of India, last year, India made electronics worth of 9.5 lakh crores. That is $112 billion. That's the industrial capacity of India in terms of high-end electronics. This is all the phones, laptops, washing machines, TVs, all the electronics that you see. This is so much of electronics was produced by India last year. This is our industrial capacity. Now, those same companies, same industrial capacity is dual use. Now, those electronics are also used in the missiles. They are also used in the military equipment, right? A lot of it can be repurposed, if the time comes and if the need arises to produce a lot of the defense equipment. So these are some of the metrics that I wanted to present to you, which really shows us the capacity of India. Now, what you've noticed is that Pakistan is nowhere in these statistics. These statistics show immense industrial and war fighting capacity of our country. More than the current arms and ammunition, it is these numbers that will help India crush Pakistan in a long protracted war. As old equipment is destroyed, India can replenish its tanks, guns, missiles far quicker than Pakistan, which has to rely solely on imports. In the end, I'll say that India is a rising global superpower where people are filled with hope and aspiration, where Pakistan is a country filled with economic despair and Islamic radicalization for which they themselves are responsible. So please like, share and subscribe this channel. Please follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you and goodbye till my next video on Strategic Finance with Sahil.